All right, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. St. Pete.net meetup. How many first-time people do we have? Just a couple. Not very many. Okay. All right. Thank you for coming. We hope that you like it and that you come to more of our presentations. The food that everybody is hopefully enjoying was brought to us by Tech Systems. They're in the back. Is anybody from Tech Systems? You guys want to do like a spiel marketing thing or anything?
We're an IT staffing and services provider, so we work with companies all over the area. So a bunch of different skill sets that we specialize in. I specifically specialize in the .NET space, so sponsor the .NET meetup each month. But if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out to any of us. We'd be happy to help.
All right. Okay, I'm Clayton Hunt, the host for the evening. Normally John Calloway is here. He's the co-host for this meetup, and I'm normally the guy behind the camera, if there is a camera. Debatable if we're going to continue doing that. Too many troubles. Our speaker tonight is Austin Wilson. He's presenting on Blazor, and I think I'll let him handle the rest of it. Austin? Hello. Hey. So yeah, I'm here today to show you guys a bit about Blazor, and also because Clayton forced me to be here today. How many people have actually heard about Blazor? Okay, good. That means you can't question me. All right, so how many of you actually write client-side applications in like Angular, JavaScript? Okay. So we'll have some convincing to do, just a little bit, but I think you'll be impressed. So Blazor, what is it? It's a way to build single-page applications in C#. Now that's not entirely C#, but it's kind of like the replacement of JavaScript, and I'll get into that. So let's move on. So who is this guy? I'm me, Austin Wilson. I am currently a services.net technical lead at a multi-level marketing company in Palmetto. Before that, I worked for a banking company, and prior to that, I worked on medical software.
Are you at that vitamins company?
No.
No?
We do vitamins though. It's just not just vitamins. But anyway.
Did you just hire Dave Daniels?
Not that I know of. I'm most familiar with C#. It's my preference, but I've also done a ton of C++, and when I can and when able, I do a bit of JavaScript, and right now our company works in mostly Angular. This is my first time speaking, so hello. You can all say first, so go ahead.
Relax.
All right, so why Blazor? Well, there are, any software, computer, anything you can think of that runs software. You have a ton of options when it comes to writing code, writing software in those environments. The computer, there's hundreds. There's some you've never heard of. There's something called lol code. It's insane. And now we have phones and tablets, yeah, native, blah, blah, blah. But really, you can pretty much write whatever you want as long as it compiles down. We also have the cloud, server side, servers. You got all kinds of, anything you can run on a computer these days, you can run on a server pretty much, especially with .NET Core now. You can pretty much run on a Mac, run on Android, AWS, in Docker. And games, same situation as all the others. And then embedded, you just put your runtime on there and you can write software for a car in any language you really want. So what about browsers? Well, you're pretty much hard-coded using JavaScript. all the browser JavaScript. So why? Well, just because, I guess, really. So along comes a little thing called WebAssembly. What is WebAssembly? It is the ability to compile code down to run on a browser, pretty much avoiding JavaScript completely. Because right now, well, prior to that, you had to, inject JavaScript to the browser. It would go through a parser, and then it would get compiled down, and the runtime, the JavaScript runtime, would run your JavaScript code. Well, with WebAssembly, you skip the parser, you skip the compiler. You're actually injecting WebAssembly runtimes or WebAssembly code into your browser and running your code in the browser. So we have this cute little extension called WASM. What is WASM? It is a binary instruction format. So it's pretty much machine code. And right now, in any modern browser, they have this implemented. Safari, Edge, Chrome, anyone worth using at least.
Phones? Oh, you said?
Yeah, even mobile implementations of all those browsers also have WebAssembly.
Of course not Internet Explorer.
Yeah. So what is Blazor? Well, first of all, Blazor is an experimental project. The guys at Microsoft said, hey, it'd be neat if we could run C# on a browser. It's literally what they said. So they started trying to write .NET applications for the browser. So now you have a UI stack that runs on .NET Core, which runs on WebAssembly in the browser. So .NET C# gets compiled into your WASM file, which then gets loaded into your browser and runs your code.
Yes, it's core.
It's mono.
Actually mono. And they used mono because it's the most compact version of .NET. And because of .NET Standard, it uses the .NET Core runtime to execute. And what does Blazor stand for? It stands for Razor in the browser. So it's utilizing Razor syntax to execute .NET code in the browser.
Why wouldn't it be different? Blazor.
Well, because Blazor means something else. So don't look that up. And Blazor does sound a lot cooler.
Sounds bad.
They made a joke about it. It stands for blockchain because blockchain's cool, right? No. No, it's just because, one, there's already something called Blazor, and Blazor sounds way better. So why Blazor? Why would you use Blazor? You have JavaScript, you have Angular, you have an insane amount of modern JavaScript frameworks these days. React, Vue, it's insane. There's one every month, I swear. Well, just to do a slight comparison between the JavaScript world and Blazor, I'm not going to target any particular JavaScript framework. It's more JavaScript in general. But so why? Well, JavaScript is constantly changing. Like I said, there's literally a new framework almost every quarter. Keeping up with the changes are insane, in my opinion. Whereas Blazor, you're running on C#. They are, when it comes to languages, they're probably one of the most mature and stable languages. Not only that, they maintain probably the highest level of backwards compatibility among modern languages. JavaScript, you have one library change and it can bring down your entire application.
Or the internet.
So that goes into the next one. There's too many third parties. If you want to do JavaScript well and I mean well as in taking advantage of what modern JavaScript looks like today. You've got gulp, you've got, I mean, I can't even, Clayton, you know all of them.
No, there's too many.
I mean,
like gulp, webpack, what's the one with the bull? Grunt.
Front.
Or it's not a bull, it's a warthog, whatever.
you got
those are just the
jQuery,
build.
Bootstrap, Knockout,
Zero.
Telric. It's insane. And any one of those can bring down the rest of them like a Jenga tower. It's crazy.
You don't need any of those libraries when using Blazor? You don't need like jQuery?
We'll get there. Don't you worry. So what do you have of Blazor? .NET. I mean, yes, there are some minor alliances on those things, but the beauty of it is you can replace them and it's nearly painless. And a lot of people have actually taken that effort. And I will show you the list of things people have written, and I think it's quite interesting the things that people have done to mitigate all those JavaScript dependencies with NuGet packages. And you'll see, it's pretty cool. So, JavaScript. It is insane just to get a JavaScript app started for those two previous reasons. It's like, I always argue with Clayton, you know, yeah, you might be able to write Hello World, but it takes you a week just to write the framework for it. C#, it's readable, maintainable, and fast. I mean, it's literally file new project, and you have a deployable project instantaneously. And I didn't have to write it. So, finally, you have several different options, and none of them truly robust. Whereas, well, this is tooling. This is specifically towards tooling. You have WebStorm, you have VS Code, and I imagine there's, those are the only two I really know about, but there's probably several more. With Blazor, you have Visual Studio, probably one of the largest IDEs out there, and probably has the most features out of most modern IDEs, as well as IntelliSense. All right. So, demo time. Let me switch over here, because now I have to duplicate my display. Does anyone have any questions before we go into demo time? I guess I should say.
Visual Studio Community supports this.
Yep. I actually have community at home, and I was testing a couple things before I showed up today just to make sure I understood how they worked.
Is it only 17 or 15, 13? Visual Studio.
2017 is free.
No, I mean, Blazor works with all of those?
Oh, no, it would have to be modern 2017.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
15.8, I think is what it is now.
The version of 17, yeah. Yeah, it's only in 2017.
Okay.
So how do we start a Blazor app? Okay. So we go.
Duplicate it.
Oh,
Sure.
sorry. What the heck? Duplicate these displays. Let's try that again. There we go. That was weird. All right. So how do we? Oh God, that's awful.
It's that new Indigo theme.
Yeah, it's hot. Get it?
Power off that monitor, sir?
Yeah, one of the channels on the HDMI is hosed. So file, new project. Nothing too crazy yet. I haven't had to break my fingers off to do this. What do? ASP.NET Core App Web Application. I'm under the .NET Core section of the Visual C#. Okay. Thinking, okay. So I have three options. Blazor, which is just your client-side application. Basically compiles down to a bunch of static files that can run on IIS, Azure, actually even blob storage, which is very impressive. we got that working at work. I was excited about that. Oh, and then I accidentally double clicked. All right. Let's go back real quick. We also have the core hosted version, which is actually a full stack application. And when I say full stack, just so you understand, because at first I didn't understand this, it is the client application, it is the API supporting that client application, and it is a shared library between the client side and the server side that allows them to communicate via a contract of models, aka Isomorphic Code. Which is probably the coolest thing about this so far for you WCF fans who love your data contracts and communicating via APIs. One of the biggest bummers about RESTful APIs is you don't usually get those contracts. You kind of just have to look at a Swagger. And then the server-side version, which is your Razor Pages, classic Razor Pages approach, which is what they are attempting to support in .NET Core 3, fully vested. But we don't want to look at that. We have that already.
So hold on, they're getting rid of regular Razor?
That is a question I don't know the answer to, but I wouldn't see why they would keep it around. But you know Microsoft, they'll probably keep it around for 5 years and eventually deprecate it.
Razor Pages?
Yeah.
Oh, you can combine them too. Razor Pages
Well, yeah.
and Blazor.
Yeah. I mean, it'll probably just be Razor Pages, and then if you want support, Blazor support, you just include the libraries.
Okay, you get rid of Razor Pages, not Razor, right?
Right.
Because Razor Pages is different.
Is it?
Yes.
Yes,
Razor Pages are the bomb.
that's different than Razor.
They're awesome.
Okay.
It's basically Razor without it.
Yeah, it's Razor with a built-in model without having to have a whole controller structure.
Classic ASP and .NET.
That's not what it is.
That's what they say. I don't know. I've done a lot of it.
That's classic Razor Pages, is just like the web forms?
No, it doesn't have a code behind necessarily. The code is in the page, just like classic ASP.
Ampersand and
Yeah. So we created a full stack application because it pretty much gives you an aspect of everything going on with Blazor. What do we have? We have a single solution. We have a dot client, which is our Blazor app, our client-facing application. We have a server application, which is your RESTful API. And then you have your shared library, which is what you use to share those models, those data contracts. So let's see if we can find the JavaScript in this. And I guarantee you it's not here. So it would probably be in a static file, right? So we'd go into the root and we go down, we keep going.
this monitor supposed to have this.
No.
Did you already have this project built, or is
Nope.
this a template?
This is brand new.
Oh,
File
template
new.
or empty project? It's-
Yep.
Which one, template?
Oh, it's template. It's,
That's the Blazor one, okay.
yeah.
Okay, never mind, just don't pay attention.
So as you can see, there's no actual JavaScript going on here. That's because it's all being supported by a NuGet package. It's serving up static files that support the JavaScript portion of running Blazor. So we have
Don't even need Bootstrap JavaScript?
no. So by default, we have Bootstrap, CSS, just for your, your niceties with Bootstrap, and we have this open license icon package called Open Iconic, and then that's it. And
That
then you
all
can,
comes down as part of the mono assembly.
yeah. We have this little HTML file, which is basically the injection point. So you have your style sheets, typical stuff, but this piece here is what's interesting here.
Could you please zoom out?
Oh, sure. Kind of wait. Is that better?
No, it was fine. It was fine. It was fine.
So this little piece right here, you can see referencing that JS and JavaScript extension. What this is actually doing when this gets compiled, the compiler is doing a replace on this, and it's actually loading up, it's referencing the mono, I believe the mono and the Blazor JavaScript to basically bootstrap the WASM file. And then we just have this base loading, which you'll see when I run this, what that really means. So yeah, that's your root file. So what do we got next? We got pages. This is where you'll do, 90% of your logic. This is just the default application. They put a little counter app in here, and this is where we'll probably talk a lot. So this is a page in a site. You have this Razor syntax, as you can see, the at page, that is literally its address in the address bar. So when you go localhost blah 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 /counter, this is where it takes you. Yeah. And then you'll notice that we have this at functions. So this is kind of mimicking what you would do in JavaScript in your JS file, but instead this is 100% C#.
Except for the add function.
Well, you got it. So what are we doing here? We're instantiating a current count variable, defaulting it to 0, and then we have a method called increment count that is just iterating current count +1. So how do we use that in our actual page? Well, we just go at increment count. We're actually invoking this C# function in our HTML with a Razor syntax on an on-click.
Supported sync.
Yep.
Is that a regular HTML button?
That is a regular HTML button.
And you use Isomorphic?
Actually, it's not a regular HTML button. This is built into Blazor components. Blazor components is a library to take advantage of binding, two-way binding, which we'll get into. But yeah.
I mean, the syntax for it is just like a regular button.
Yeah, this is pretty much the bread and butter of Blazor right here. Now let's look at something a little more advanced, just a tiny bit. This is called fetch data. Let's move this out of the way. But again, we have our at page, that's its address. But we also have these two extra things, at using and at inject. At using, that is referencing that shared library. So we want to use those models in our page, basically, just like you would use a using in a C# file. And we have this at inject. Blazor supports dependency injection, first class, just like you would write a .NET Core API.
What is this notation?
Sorry?
HTTP client, HTTP, what is it?
So what it's doing here is it's saying I want to inject the HTTP client. So it's asking that from the dependency injection. I want a type of HTTP client. It does its thing, and then I'm aliasing it as HTTP.
So it'd be initially set up inside your startup.
Yep. Now this one comes by default. Unfortunately, I wish they wouldn't have done that because I hate when they do that.
Thing for you.
Yeah. I don't need the shadows, but I mean, you're probably going to need this no matter what, so it makes sense in the long run. But so how do we utilize that? We just scroll down here. So we have this if forecast equals null, we want the page to display the word loading in a paragraph. But if it isn't null, we want to write this table. And probably need to build this. That's why it's yelling at me. But so we have this for each, nothing crazy here, and we're referencing all the fields in the forecast model from the for each. So how do we actually fill that forecasts array? Well, we define an array, and you don't have to use a base array, you can use a list, which I know is way better. And then we have this on init async. It's using async await. And then we're calling that HTTP reference get JSON async. We're telling it we expect it to be an array of weather forecasts, which is that shared model from the shared library. And this is the route, not including the base address, the route to the API to request that information. That is the GET call.
Where is the base address coming from?
So to explain that, because this is a full stack application, the API is what is serving up the static Blazor files. So it already has intimate knowledge about the API. You don't necessarily have to do that, but if for this version of the templates, that's how it works.
But if you needed to call something, you could pass a base URL.
Yeah, you would
into
just
it?
pass the full address. A really cool thing, actually, with the client-only version, they mimic this effect, but it's a flat file, a JSON file, and they use the same syntax to reference the JSON data. They use the get JSON async. It's really cool. I did try to do a put, not work. It's like, that would be awesome, right? To update a flat file. So yeah, it's asynchronously as the page loads, populating our forecast array, and then it is actually dynamically refreshing the page and populating that table. There's no invoking of a page refresh or anything, because it's bound. It's a two-way binding effect.
You know, when
Could you go up to the using statement?
Sure.
So how can you do that again?
What is that exactly?
Yeah, you can do that. No refresh because.
Okay, so everything in C# starts as null unless it's a base type, right? Int starts at 0, so on and so forth. But so basically, because this forecast array is not instantiated at initial load, is null. So that's why it'll only show the loading paragraph. I guess the best way to do this is just run it. But so when the page loads, it's null.
Did you slide all this stuff with that?
Just give a second. So there's that loading from that initial index HTML. And here's our Blazor app. So we go to the fetch data. And you saw for like half a second that loading. So that was when the forecast was null. And asynchronously, it was loading that data from the API side. And then once the API side came back and finally got the information, the two-way binding triggered to update the page with the fully flushed HTML.
Is the binding similar to knockout binding that whatever you type in immediately impacts the model?
Yeah, in effect. I don't know much about knockout, but actually I know nothing about knockout.
It's basically two-way binding.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a way where you can hook into whenever a parameter is set, and that's kind of how they think about these fields you have in your functions, is they are parameters on the page, and you can actually write a function that triggers every time a parameter is set. I won't go down that rabbit hole because really I haven't found a necessary reason to use it yet, but this is all coming from the API. Actually, let's take a look. So we go to network, do a reload. So this is what is actually coming from the API. So there's that WebAssembly JS file that I told you was doing the intercept and swap. Here's our CSS files, nothing too crazy. Bootstrap, the Blazor boot mono, there's your mono right there. You can see it did a 304 because I already downloaded mono. I didn't have to re-get it.
So these things cache properly.
Yeah, so get this. This is the crazy part. That is a .NET DLL running on my browser. It says 304. I already downloaded that DLL. Why do I need to get it again?
Is download is run in your browser?
Yes.
How do you run in the .NET DLL in your browser? Yes, I know this is Blazor. That's what it does.
I know it's witchcraft for sure.
I thought they'd do that anymore.
Yeah.
Interrupt right there.
There's their shared model library.
Zoom in.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
It looks fine to me. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Visual Studio Code?
Sorry?
You in Visual Studio Code?
No, I'm in Visual Studio.
Can you use Visual Code now?
Yeah, yes, you can.
Do you download an extension for that? Because I just updated, I didn't see anything.
You have to use the CLI to start an application in VS Code currently. So you have to do like .NET New Blazor app or something like that.
I'm in regular Visual Studio 2017.
You have to install the SDK.
That's
Yeah,
all. Does that run on NPM? Do you start it up in NPM when you're doing it that way?
In
No.
code, no.
No?
In code, it's all C#.
I don't know. I have to actually make this blow up.
It's you've done that run. It's just like everything else. It's just there's a
Sorry?
The three
Command to
points
create a
in
Blazor.
right, go to the right corner.
Ellipsis is
Right on top, plus.
Okay, here.
That one.
Okay. Well, that just enlarges the page.
Oh, yeah, that's what I meant.
Oh, you want the page bigger.
Yeah, but, okay, but then the other part.
Magnifier.
Ugh,
Start magnifier.
never use this. Okay.
Now it's bigger.
You can do 130. Or 50.
We'll keep it there. So yeah, these are all .NET libraries running in your browser. System, pretty much the base to any .NET application. And I could go through all of these, but that would be exhausting. And hey, check these out. These are symbol files. What are symbol files for? Debugging?
So now, client-side debugging doesn't work yet in Visual Studio, does it?
They have a first iteration of it out in the wild.
In .6?
I have it on the computer. I'm going to try to get it to work.
Okay.
I had it working at home, kinda. We'll try. But basically, being able to break point C# code in the browser is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you have your .NET Standard, which is what made this really all possible. Yeah.
That's the API call over there.
Oh yeah, here's the API call. So there's your API sample data, that's your router on the API, and you get the 200. Took 67 milliseconds.
75 milliseconds is worse. That's for what's 605? Is that for the system? There's the 630.
Those really shouldn't take that long, considering they were already there.
Well, it says they were not modified,
Yeah,
so they're cached.
yeah. So I'm not sure why it would be reporting such high numbers. But one cool thing about all of this, if I can find it.
Can you please refresh it? I'm curious if it's holding down the size.
How do you do that in... Okay. It's still coming back not modified.
Control R.
If you go to the side,
I can't.
Your
I
other
gotta
side.
take this magnifier
Yeah.
off. It's driving me nuts.
down in the bug next to the stop, there's a
Hold on.
no. You're right
Hold
there.
on. I'm trying to find out why it's even launching and yeah. Why do I have this set to edge? Miss me.
F12.
So we'll do a empty cache and hard read load. So this page was about 1.8 megabytes.
And just so you know, if you click in there and get focus, if you control plus, you'll be able to plus up that entire area.
Okay, so click in here somewhere. Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Control plus.
Get rid of that.
Maybe 2 plus.
Let's make this its own thing. There we go. So yeah, so 1.8 megabytes for the entire Blazor runtime. .NET Standard, Mono, your WASM, all your CSS, and they already mentioned the fact that this is experimental. They have many iterations to go through to make this a much smaller. Not to mention the fact this may be the first time you visit the site. Think of all the preceding times you visit that site. You already have all the DLLs. And these numbers are a lot better than what I was getting on Edge for the most part. We can try another reload. Gotta have clear, right?
No, you got cache disabled.
Oh, do I? If I do that. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Let's give it a... So those are... Okay, here's the 304s. Yeah, that millisecond jumps up with the 304s. That doesn't make any sense.
Maybe it's just an F mark.
But anyway, you get the point. But, so the counter,
To make sure that's the right one. Takes longer to.
all this is doing is executing that function and then automatically, dynamically increasing that two-way binded int. So what does Angular have that Blazor doesn't? How about components? Well, not anymore.
You notice that when you press that click button, does it refresh the DOM for that entire defined area, or is it smart to like no?
It's using a virtual DOM to only refresh the specific area. So, components. Here's our main layout, and we'll skip this guy for a minute because it's not too important since it's basically the base of every application. But what is this? Nav menu. That's weird. That's not HTML. Well, it is Blazor, so we have this nav menu CS HTML. So what it's doing is taking this HTML page and it automatically makes it into a component. So now I can reference this nav menu wherever I would like. And it has its own function block. It's self-sustaining.
You can pass parameters to those.
Yes, you can.
The nav element, the nav bar element, and then there's that code for you.
So what if I just wanted to for whatever reason I want a counter on my forecast page? Well, it'll put it there for me. And it, like I said, all components are relatively self-sustaining unless you don't make them self-sustaining. It's building. No, it's not. This is one part I do not like. Sometimes it does not want to build. There we go. So we go to fetch data. I have a counter.
You could just indulge me real quick. See those table headers on the table?
Yes.
You could open up Chrome Inspector and change the text of that date text on the table headers.
Right here?
Yeah, that would work. Change that to be something like that.
Not there.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, any HTML data.
But that's gonna get replaced.
Yeah, and that one's working.
Yeah, and then click me button. And click the click me button.
They don't need to do each
Yeah,
other.
the page doesn't refresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's trying to make sure it's not a full refresh every time I click. Yeah.
So is it some type of an Ajax call, or how does it refresh? Do we know about that?
No, this is static.
Static.
This is all running on your browser. There's no Ajax.
Well,
Well, the Ajax is the click me.
the API call for the forecast.
The API is using HTTP client.
Right.
Right. That's all C# DLLs.
And the click me is coming from the browser, not from the server.
Right. Yeah, this is not communicating with the server at all. It's only, the only time this is communicating with the server is when you need to fetch a page. Actually, that's not even true. It's already giving you all that information up front. Something Clayton actually taught me that I wasn't actually, I was like, how is this a SPA? There's an href. That doesn't make any sense to me. So, to give you an idea what I was talking about, so we have this, where is it? Nav menu. So we have a nav link. This is a Blazor component, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, it's making an href call right here. Well, an href call is a request to get a new page. And then I mean, that would be a full load, right? Well, however they're doing it, it is not. It is just doing a swap of what is the current state of the page using routing, just like you would do in Angular.
How does it handle forms and forms data?
I haven't really used it because I haven't needed to. You know, if I want to write form, I've just been putting an object on the page that I can compile, I can fill, and then submit through a submit button.
Gotcha.
And then I'll actually show you my little pet project, and you guys can take a look at it. But you all have to sign non-disclosures.
Yeah, we know.
Do they have any talks at all on the way of packaging, what these are called components? How would I share these? Like, let's say I create a library of, extractable.
There are a slew of examples out there right now.
Oh, really?
Yes. One of them is a complete mitigation of Bootstrap.
What?
So how do you reference it though? Like, do you need it?
You get,
So it's a library reference?
yeah,
that has-
add package. It's called Blazor Strap.
Very creative.
Where they got that?
He completely abstracts away models, tab content. I mean, he's got, literally he wrote pages for every example that's on the Blazor's website. He mocked out the entire Bootstrap, he mocked out the entire Bootstrap website in Blazor. And I can show that too as well. Actually, I use a little bit of it because at first I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So I was like, oh, I'll just use this guy's code and figure it out. And it's all open source on GitHub, so I kind of made it my own. All right. What else do we got? We can talk a little about layout. So your layout component, that's the layout of your page. We got the, let's see here. We got this sidebar, the nav menu. That's your layout component, your static existence of your site. Now, we've done everything inside the CSHTML, but if you're writing something complex, that can get insanely huge. Like, you'd have a huge file, and routing through that would be insane. Well, you can do a side-by-side implementation of C# and the CSHTML page, and basically inherit from the CS file and treat it as part of your HTML page.
Like Razor Pages does.
Basically, yeah. So we'll just hijack this page for a second. No, we'll do it brand fresh. Let's go pages, add new item. Razor view. We'll call this demo. Just a blank page, and then we'll go add code demo base. So right now you have to keep uniqueness between files names. The extension does not remove the ambiguity, unfortunately, at the time. Okay. Oh, I have it running. I made the biggest mistake. I didn't capitalize. Sorry, Clayton. Don't hit me. All right, so we have this demo page. Let's give it a route. What do we want to do? Oh yeah, we want to inherit demo base. There we go. I'm done. See you guys later. So we got this demo base. Well, this is a Blazor component. Yep. Oh, I need a constructor. So, what are we going to put on this demo base? What are we going to put on this demo page? Let's display some text. String text. And we'll default it to what? What's up? We'll go to our demo page and we'll go h1 text. I spelled that right, yep.
I think you might be running into text as a keyword in Razor.
No, I did this a second ago.
Public?
Maybe.
But you have to put it in a code block.
There it is. That's fine. Public. Which makes no sense. So let's add this to the nav menu. Just copy this guy. Demo. Demo. How we doing? Okay. All right, so we have demo. What's up?
Doc.
Well, that's pretty freaking simple.
Yeah, taking your menu.
Let's do something else. I know. Let's inject something into the path. Text. Go here. We have to add this little guy. Come on. Oh, I'm running.
The one thing that JavaScript has over C#.
Yeah. For whatever reason, you have to make it private. Don't ask me why.
Parameters?
Yeah. I think it's nonsense. Maybe protected? There we go. So,
What do you just have to make it protect and send it publicly?
I don't know why.
Oh, that's good.
They made a very brief explanation and did not make sense, so.
Otherwise, it won't work.
Most intelligent thing for today.
So let's say, why does this need to be protected? Cool. And all I did there was add that attribute.
You
Make
change
it,
the route now? Is it
Yep.
gonna refresh?
if I change the route,
Yes.
that's a good point. Change the route. I don't know if it can be more.
Nice.
This has spaces.
20.
That's what it's supposed to be.
So there might be some decoding there that needs to happen, but experimental. I mean, I think that's fairly impressive considering how much code would have taken to do a lot of this stuff in JavaScript. All right, so what else can we think of?
Is there an event pipeline?
Yes, yes. They have event handlers. I haven't really dabbled in much of that, but let's try, let's do something different. Okay, let's mess with counter a little bit. We put the counter in fetch data because we could. But now let's make counter increment, so by a different number. So let's make an incrementer, default it to 1, plus equals incrementer. And then we make this a parameter. Yes, yes. You need this guy too. And then in our fetch data, we're gonna go incrementer equals 5. Counter, or we put it on the fetch data, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So you can make your own custom parameters that you can inject things into. You can do some really crazy stuff too, like on change, I want it to run an action. So I will create, or actually not on change necessarily. This is where it gets hairy because now we're stepping into the zone where things aren't quite working. Let's do an on click, but we're going to use a different syntax. On click, do something. Put this guy here. Oh. And do do something is going to be an action. Void do something. Console.writeLine. This has incremented. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I have confidence that it will. So we go to counter. We can make a new parameter. Parameter protected action on click. Then on click. We should probably do that safely if on click does not equal null. Stop it. Run it.
No curly braces.
Trying to save time. But so we have this guy here. Let's open this guy again. Console. Now we did a C# console.writeLine. Okay, we don't necessarily have a traditional command prompt console here. Luckily, they have it going to the console in the DevTools. As you can tell, there's some stuff happening here. So I'm hoping this works. I'm not guaranteeing it. Look at that. This is incremented. And that was an injected action. So I basically made a closure, right? No? No? I don't know. I created a dynamic function, per se, a non-associated function, injected it into a child, and it called that action, and we got results.
And now the child human service is gonna get trouble with you now.
Where did you write it to again?
Sorry?
Where did you write it to? No, no, your message. You said you wrote it to the console.
Yeah, console.writeLine. Great. Where was that? I'm lost. Okay. Yeah, so do something. I pass do something. Do something is basically boils down to an action, and it just going console.writeLine. This is
set up in the browser debugger.
Yeah.
In the console. In the console.
Right. I clicked it 4 times. It condensed all 4 of them. Let's talk about nested HTML elements inside a component, injecting elements inside of a component. So they call it a render fragment. Let's create a new page here. Up there. Render a child. So we want to do some cool stuff here. We'll make a functions. So we have a counter. And in this counter, we want to do some stuff. We want to say something inside the counter, like, let's see. This counter is not approved by Microsoft. So typically this wouldn't work because it's not hooked up properly. So we go to the counter. We had this thing called a protected render fragment. What did I do wrong? Oh, it's just taking a minute.
Gotta give it a name.
Oh, sorry. Render a child. Thank you. Actually, I don't think I can call it that. And we're just gonna put it here. So what are we doing here? Did I do that right? Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, there we go. So what we did here is we basically told it any sub-elements of the component are going to exist within this render fragment. And we want this render fragment to exist between this H1 and this paragraph. So in our render a child component, we are passing this paragraph as the child to that counter page. Now we need to give this some location. I'll just hijack this one for now. Render. Oh, I think I broke it. Okay, what did I do wrong? Let me use my trusty knowledge here. Nope, don't want to go there.
How is debugging? Can we step through it?
We will. We'll try.
Okay.
They have the hardest time doing it at Ignite, so. And those guys basically work on this thing daily. It's a bit ridiculous. So I'm going to try to figure out what I did wrong here. This is my own little pet project, so. Let's see here. This, well, that should have worked. Oh, now my computer is wigging out.
What is the attack?
Oh, that should have worked.
Private there. Is this the one that needs to be private?
Maybe. We'll give it a shot. It should have worked. That was in counter. I'm doing render this child, render this child, render. I'm just going to call this child content because that seems to be the it doesn't, you might have to actually be private because it's not glowing blue for some reason, and it was in my other, no it wasn't, never mind.
And then did you go to /render?
I did. maybe something else I did wrong on this page. What was the other one?
On click.
Yep. Let's give it one more shot. If not, I can show you an example in my pet project. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it had to be private. But you get the idea. So something like modals, you can make a reusable modal as a component, and you can inject all criteria that would exist in that modal via the render fragment, and you hook up your submit button to an HTTP call. You can spawn another modal based on the submit button of that modal, so on and so forth. And that makes reusable code, which is 90% of my job. All right, so that's pretty much what Blazor has to offer on a simple level. I'm open to suggestions on anything else. I know we wanted to get to attempt at debugging, and I say attempt because it's an attempt.
Parameters can take any type.
Yes. Oh,
What was the question? I did a question.
sorry?
What was the question?
I asked, can parameters take any type?
Oh, okay.
Any C# type. How about binding? Explicit binding. Actually, I'll go to my pet project for this one because it really doesn't do it justice doing it here. So this is that site I'm working on, just my personal site. To give you a basic synopsis, I like to play D&D, Pathfinder, so on and so forth, role-playing games, and I find it insanely monotonous to work with pen and paper, so I'm writing a Blazor application to remove all of that and put it on a site. So we can use tablets, computers, laptops, so on and so forth to record all that information and more. So, I'm not sure why it's giving me a squiggly there. Last time I ran this, it ran. Oh, cool. So first I'll show you the site. We'll go over one that's a little simpler, and then I can show you a little more advanced. So this is the site. You can see how fast that loaded up. And that was a fresh build and run. So there's a couple things going on right here. This is a component, each one of these pieces. This roadmap down here is also a component. Just something I devised for my own sanity, and if potentially I have people watching this site, keep an eye on. So what do you need to do to play pen and paper games? You need dice. Well, I made a dice generator in Blazor, and when I wrote this, I already had a similar client application written in JavaScript, Bootstrap, and I literally cut my code down to 10% of what I written in JavaScript.
Wow.
So what do we have here? We have a coin, a flip, heads or tails, 4-sided up to 100-sided. And this is all just on-click events. So let's look at what's actually going on.
Are you using Blazor?
A little bit, yeah. For me to just get running wasn't, I mean, I don't know enough about JavaScript in general. I'm a services developer. I didn't start working in the front end really till about 2-3 years ago. I'd always been excited, but I always got typecasted into like batching and services and, you know, boring stuff. So like, you know what, I need to do something on the front end. And then this came along, I'm like, perfect. So I have this dice generator. And please excuse the curlies, because though obviously you could see that all worked. So, you know, we have our HTML. One cool thing is I can reference the CSS file for this project in the page itself. I don't have to put it in that main layout page. If I only need it for this page, I put it right there at the top of the page. I got a button. This is actually HTML buttons. I try to stay as close to base HTML as possible. I'm taking advantage of an on-click event. So actually all of this is HTML except for the fact that I have Razor syntax here. And I could have mitigated a lot of this using a for loop or something. But the real value here is in the actual results we're getting back from the on-click events. So I got a table here. The table exists. Oh, sorry. The table exists for roles. I have an array of roles. I iterate through the count of roles. Show the results. That's about it. So I have a random. This is a C# random that I'm utilizing on the page. And then I have a list. I told you you can use lists. You doubted me. And then I have this roll dice method. My HTML is passing how many sides I want to roll. I create a new role. So this is instantiating a C# object. I'm using the inline assignment. I tell it how many sides, and then I use the random. Roles.add. Add it to my list of roles. And if there's more than 10 roles, I remove the last role from the list, so I'm not creating this endless page. And what have I done? I referenced an array. I made a method that adds to a list and removes from a list when it's too big. And I'm clicking buttons. And I didn't have to tell it to refresh the page. I mean, that's a win in my book. Now, let's see here. I have that shared library. I have my dice generator folder, and here's my role from coming from that shared library. Now, what were we going to go over? Don't mind the name here, but now this gets a little crazy. You can see Blazor strap. So this is how you handle referencing components from a NuGet package. Hopefully they get rid of this in future installments because it's kind of ugly to add this Razor syntax add tag helper. But almost like Angular, what are we saying? I want everything in the Blazor strap DLL. I want to be able to reference anything happening in there. I have my HTTP method.
Can you not name those instead of using the asterisk?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Blazor strap is simply the name of the reference.
That's
reference
the
assembly.
DLL Blazor strap.
Okay.
That'd be interesting if you could alias different pieces of that.
Are those the same tag helpers
Do it in Angular.
as in regular core? ASP.NET.
You know, I'm not sure. So what do we got here? Well, this first piece here, and this is a board game, so please excuse the nerdiness going on right now. But basically you have this concept of a settlement. So I wanted to be able to create new settlements. So to create a new settlement, I wanted it something like you click a button, it opens a modal, you fill in some stuff, you click submit, and it adds it to the table. So I made a button, my button's green, and when you click it, it calls this open modal function.
And your modules and your buttons are both not Bootstrap, but the other one.
Well, here's my modal.
Okay.
So, this is this is an HTML. This might be using Blazor strap.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's definitely not Bootstrap.
So I have this is open parameter. So I have a local reference called is open. If we scroll down, by default is open is false. When you click, I call the open modal function. It sets is open to true. And now, I don't know if I have to do this. This is very early Blazor. I made a call to state has changed, which is basically telling, it's triggering that event that typically would happen dynamically to refresh pieces of the page. But I'm not exactly sure I need that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll find out.
It's going now.
Yeah. So what is our modal doing? So our modal has a lot of stuff going on. We have a header with an on-click that closes it. So your typical X. A title for the header. We have a body. This is our, so this whole thing right here, this is our render fragment. So we're injecting this into this Blazor strap modal. Not only that, this is a component as well through Blazor strap. We're injecting this render fragment into that component. We're also passing a parameter and so on and so forth. Modal body is another component. This is all a render fragment that exists within modal body. It's just this cascading container. So how do I make sure that the fields that I'm referencing are actually updating? Well, they added this bind parameter to Blazor. So what I'm saying here is I have this model called new settlement in my functions Blazor. Anytime this field gets updated on an on change, so we have an input text, and I'm telling it anytime this changes, I want it to update this field, and vice versa. That is your two-way binding. That's all of it. To do that in Angular,
Banana in a box.
Banana in a box.
The binding syntax for Angular 2 for two-way binding is a square brace with a parentheses inside of it, and then ng model.
I don't think it's as simple as that, but at least when I look at our code. But
Stop looking at our code.
So I also was like, you know what? I want to be able to select types of settlements. Well, now I have to create a select. Well, thank God they made this simple, and it's, again, just a bind. This is an enumeration, a C# enumeration that it's binding to, and I am just enumerating through every instance of that enumeration to display in a select list. And also a create. So this is my submit button. It is executing asynchronously using C# async syntax.
Why are you using async?
because I wanted to.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure it worked. Oh, we're already running. Great. Oh, wait, I have to
They
probably...
didn't have to use Ajax, right?
Right. It's kind of funny. You'd think they would have maybe snuck Ajax in there because it's Microsoft, right?
Well, I mean,
There's support
any
on-
callback to the server is Ajax.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I need you to prove it.
Probably find it in Microsoft.
So here it is, running. I have it creating a settlement by default just to speed up debugging everything and testing everything. So let's create a new settlement. Oh, look at that. I didn't need state has changed.
Okay.
So blah, 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 blah. Ta-da!
Sweet.
Where's that assisting?
That is oh, thank you. Good question.
There's a question.
What's the question?
Where's it going?
Where's it stored?
Get rid of that guy. I don't need him anymore. Get rid of him. Where is it storing? Well, it is storing here in the list.
So in memory.
Yes. But it is also able to collect a default list from the API.
That's Ajax right there.
Async.
Asynchronous JavaScript over XML.
Yeah.
Whatever you say, buddy. All right. What's your name again?
It's not being an explicit Ajax call, though. So
It's-
Ajax without Ajax?
It's making an XHR request, which is Ajax.
Deep down, it's probably an
That's what I mean,
Ajax.
deep down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
not-
You don't have to do it.
That's what I don't care.
All I know is Ajax who. So this is something we actually didn't look at, the controller side, the server side. And there's no really reason to if you know .NET Core APIs at this point. Because, well, it's just a .NET Core API. There's nothing special here, except for one thing. But here's our get. It's getting from this underscore settlements, which is actually using a cache collection I wrote, and all that is a static list that
So
I've,
there's no database here.
no,
Okay.
no, that costs money to deploy, so, and I'm cheap. All that is I,
You can do a local SQL file.
stop. All I did was add a singleton of cache collection, so it's just keeping it in memory for my API. But the cool thing is, if I go away and come back, it's still there. Yep. So, dependency injection, well, there it is in an API. Oh, before we get sidetracked on that, how is it serving up the Blazor? Like that. That's it. That's all. No big story. That's all it took.
Do they have guidance on securing this stuff? If you want to, so for instance, if I want to talk to a database, SQL Server somewhere in the cloud, a way to secure all that information.
I mean, I would believe it'd be all default C# security, nothing special. C# is one of the most secure languages on the planet today. I would expect you would treat SQL just as you would treat any other framework.
Probably a good idea why there's 3 projects here. Client side probably only want to reference the models.
Right, you know.
So the API might be token based.
Point at a server. I mean, the one difference is you still got to point at a server to get back to the server.
Right.
If that code lives on the client, then it's literally.
You're
on the
right,
client.
yeah. I don't condone ever calling SQL on a client.
Okay.
Yeah, the client would do token authentication, same as anything else, and communicate with the API.
True.
When you display the pictures, do you have controllers?
I don't know how you do token
Do you
authentication in
have
Blazor.
controllers like an MVC application?
Mm-hmm.
On the back.
Well, this is completely separate from the Blazor application. The only thing that the API is serving here is one, being a static, a source for the Blazor static files, which you don't need, and being also that API, that middle ground between your data store and your client.
So can you use Blazor in an MVC application?
You should be able to, yes.
You know, if they have any plans or can they currently, the entry point for the page that you showed looked like there wasn't a lot of code there, like where it pointed to like what element it wants to be the root. You know, like,
So
the point I'm getting at is there a way, or do they plan on eventually supporting a way for you to deploy just a JavaScript file and a public function that someone could just call and say, hey, start this world on this element here, all Blazor, while the rest of my app is whatever I want to be.
I mean, that's essentially what it's doing, I believe. If you look here, just like your API, you have a program and you have a startup CS. This is only the code that exists in Visual Studio. Once it's compiled, that is completely abstracted away, and you have your WASM file. So this is your dependency injection here. This is your pipeline when making calls to any routing inside your Blazor app. So you can add security here, you can add IP restrictions if you felt so inclined, whatever you would really want. But this is your dependency injection here. I don't think I did any dependency injection on the client side here, mainly because this is an older version of Blazor. Yeah.
So when you say startup, on startup there was that app tag, does it go look for that app tag somewhere and that's how it knows that it's
Yeah.
effectively the start page?
Yep.
Okay.
So here's the program. And this is just like you write any other API. You have your host builder.
Mhm.
You use use Blazor startup. You're targeting that startup file. And in that WebAssembly.js file, I think it is explicitly targeting this main as its entry point for the application. But let's implement local storage. How hard is that? Well, that would require JavaScript. That sounds awful. I'm not writing that.
Terrible.
Let's
Well, let's look at it.
let's check out what we got. Blazor. Oh, look at that. I already looked that up once. Oh, thanks, Chris.
This is Blazor what storage?
Local.
Local storage.
Blazored local storage. And there's a couple of these. I don't know if one's better than the other. This is the one I've used and it works, so I'm sticking to it. So how do I implement that? Services dot add is not add. Use. Oh, no. Oh, it's be add local storage.
Oh,
Yay!
there you go.
I now have local storage.
It's just too hard, I'm sorry.
I know, right? How could anyone deal with this? Let's put it in counter. Let's say I want to save where my counter is in its steps. Okay. Inject local storage. Syntacted override on init. We'll do, yeah, why not? On init async. Current count equals local storage dot get. I don't know why my IntelliSense isn't working. Probably because that's not what it's called. No.
Need to use them?
Let me double check, because I actually have a project that's using this.
It's cheating.
I don't have all the answers. That's why I did it earlier, so I did have all the
At least it
answers.
starts with Visual Studio 2017.
Add local storage. I did that right. So this was my simple attempt at making a Kanban board. I had to use a fully qualified reference. There we go. And it's using an interface, which I love. And then we can come in here. Oh, by the way, this is a waitable. Identifier current. Oh, let's do name of current count. Async. Oh, cannot be inferred. You're good point. Cool. Now we need to save it. Local storage dot set item name of current count Cool. We should make this async so we can take advantage of the fact that this is asynchronous, but I'm not gonna, because that's a waste of time right now.
Gonna write it out.
Now this might fail because I believe this will return null
First time.
since it's trying to turn it into an integer, and integers cannot be null. Maybe it'll default to 0, we'll see. Let's find out where I put it. I think it's this one. Double check. Oh, it's all of them.
Why don't you make it a nullable?
Sorry?
Why don't you make it a nullable?
Because Clayton hates nulls and I don't want to offend him.
It's true.
So let's increment, go here, come back, it's still 20. Let's turn it off. Let's run it again.
Let's turn it off.
I just closed the page.
Killed the process.
Close the page. Just stop one.
Ha ha! 2 lines of code. Well, 3 if you count the get and the set, but
4. You had to add it, you had to
oh come
bring it in,
on,
and then you had to set it.
So
If you're gonna brag on it, you need to be able to be called out on it.
so where's that stored again? Memory, right? No.
No.
Application? Okay. Local storage. Just so you know I'm not cheating. Current count 20.
There you are.
Very nice.
Now that is using JavaScript interops to do that. But guess what? I imported a NuGet package. I don't care. Yeah.
all browsers now support local storage. The local storage in the browser itself.
He's saying yes.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty much.
You have two-way binding here
Yes.
on front end. So you're saying this could definitely just totally replace
Ajax.
no, those are the Google thing. You hate so much.
Angular?
Angular.
I mean, I feel like it has a lot of potential, and I don't want to hate on Angular. I mean, Angular serves a purpose. It had value at the moment it was incepted, and for some people, it's, you know, God's gift on earth. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought it was great because raw JavaScript is a pain.
Yes.
I mean, if you ask me, I like jQuery because you get to literally just cheat.
What is this missing that Angular has?
What is this missing that Angular
That you would
has?
normally use.
Pain and anguish.
Sorry? It has server-side rendering. I would say a lot of the niche stuff that just isn't there yet, like the event handling. I'm having like I said, I have real trouble with the event handling, especially nested event handling inside components. I might be doing it wrong. I'm not trying to do it well. I'm trying to pilot this stuff, but sometimes it just doesn't click. It doesn't react. Drag and drop. I feel like that's huge.
And Angular does that well?
I don't know. No? Okay, never
Okay,
mind.
well, then-
When you got to pull in an NPM package.
Oh, really? Oh. Well, I mean, you have to do that for JavaScript anyway, really, right? That's a jQuery thing. Drag and drop was jQuery initially, wasn't it?
Nah,
Really?
it's a browser feature.
It's a lot of code. And I could probably do it if I use JavaScript interrupts. But I want to use Blazor. But I honestly can't think of anything that Angular does today that Blazor doesn't do and does a lot cleaner. The routing in Angular is awful. Maybe unit testing. I haven't tried to do unit testing at all yet.
With the base class, you can unit test all you want.
If you did side by side, you could definitely do unit testing. But if you wanted to do inline, I'm not sure how that would work. But there are efforts to do that. I mean, I'm really excited for this project. I'm glad they put a fire under it, and people are reacting. Big box companies are actually supporting a lot of this. I mean, big box companies are supporting .NET Core, so it only makes sense that this would be next. Stuff people like Amazon, Google.
I know you probably can't answer this, possibly can't answer this. What's the future of this? You see this going somewhere? One of those crazy Google experiments they just throw away, or you think it's going to be prime time sometime?
I am praying that it will be the standard for web applications, or single page applications for companies. I know Clayton and I are both tech leads at our company. We keep telling them it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, we're an Angular shop, and I've already told them as soon as this is not experimental, we're switching.
Really?
They think I'm joking.
Do they give any kind of, I hate to use the word guarantee, but any kind of license, like Go Live or whatever, at Ignite for this?
They announced that the server-side rendering would be part of .NET Core 3. That's the only promise they made. And I think that's smart, because I would hate for them to underdeliver.
Right.
I mean, as you can see, a lot of it is already there. It says don't make a production application, but I feel like you could probably get away with making a production application. Show you something a little more crazy, and I say crazy because I'm doing a lot here. So this is a tab navigation, tab content. I started with the Blazor Blazor strap, but I actually invented my own tab content just using C#. You can see it's not, but you can see the amount of data I'm representing here. And this is all in memory. Please excuse the CSS.
And you should implementation.
These are creating,
Wow.
and these are all modifiable.
Oh man, awesome.
Oh, that's not working. But
Is it a component?
yep. Each one of these, so this content is a component. Each one of these is a component within a component because I made this deletable record basically a wrapper to inject components into. So when I wanted to make something that looks like this, I wouldn't have to write it over and over. I just said, you know, I need something to be deletable. So I made a deletable record component, and that's what this is. Because you can see, I use it here, I use it here, I use it here, I use it here, not on here, but I mean, I'm using it everywhere. And each one of those is referencing the CSS on its own. So this little X and everything is all contained into its own CSS file. I don't have to muddy my bigger page CSS files to do that. And this is all, you know.
So are you saying that all the tabs are on one page, or you are calling some type of a partial page?
You know, I take that back a little bit. I believe I'm doing this all on one page, but the promise to myself was to make this all in its own components. Here, I'll show you. Why don't I just show you? So here's that all-inclusive tab content setup. So, oh yeah, multi routes. You can do multi routes. So if I want someone to come to this using an existing settlement, if I want them to come back to this on a current tab, so if they do a back button, it'll go back to that tab.
Could you make that nullable and then only have one?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. That's why they suggested just adding multiples.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to do one that was just completely blank, I would not put anything on it. And then I would default those values in the parameter set. I have this announcement, which I homebrewed. It basically just sets a banner at the top that says changes are saved. But here's my tabs, and yes, it's not great. But basically, I have this method called change tab. You pass it what tab you want to currently display. I wrote this tab link, and it displays if the current tab equals that string value.
Like anonymous functions.
This is an anonymous function. This is literally just a...
Yeah, over there.
This one is an actual function.
But not the container.
No. So each one of these tab panes is its own existence. And I'm doing all the binding here. But if you go down to the code, so this is the change tab method I'm using. So I'm just assigning the current tab to equal the past tab. And you could probably do this up top. You wouldn't have to write this function. Unfortunately, I did. I have it defaulting to main. Here it actually gets the information for the settlement. So this determines whether the alert displays. No, I don't want that. That's the alert. Put a close button on it. But, yep. This is a pretty big, and it does need to be componentized a lot more. This is literally my first crack at Blazor, but even being that, I feel like this is a lot cleaner than what you would get if you wrote this in JavaScript. And I'm using, for all the actual arrangement of all this information, I'm using CSS Grid. So up here, I'm explicitly referencing my CSS for this page. If we go up to the root here, CSS, here. So I'm importing everything I need for that page inside my main CSS. Just kept it cleaner, and I don't have this one huge page. So each one of these is basically the instructions on how to display each one of those tabs. So we go to settlement event. I've got display grid, 1FR, 1FR, one fraction, put a gap between each one of those fractions. But that's a whole nother conversation, CSS Grid. So
What is CSS Grid?
CSS Grid is a new method for arranging elements on a page. So think of the actual page as a grid, and you're templating that grid. So like Flexbox is linear.
Right.
CSS Grid is two-dimensional. Yeah. Yeah, you're basically defining a matrix. It's way better than Flexbox.
Really?
I mean, I'm literally right here saying I need a column that's 2% of the page, 70% of the page, 4% of the page, and 24% of the page. But not even the page. That is the size of the columns within its current element.
So example, what's the example?
That I'm not sure. But it's just nested upon nested of matrices existing on the page.
Is that a product component? What is that?
No, that is standard in CSS3.
Oh, okay.
I highly recommend it.
Which means it works on almost all the browsers.
Almost. Backwards compatibility. So, Blazor is supported on all modern evergreen browsers, even Safari. They had a bug. I don't know if they've fixed it yet, but that was a bug in WebAssembly, so shame on them. And there are, supposedly it is also supported on older browsers using something called asm.js.
But not
IE7.
IE7.
Damn. jQuery
Yeah. So it'll work places React won't, it'll work places Angular won't.
Actually, what places that Microsoft stuff?
Yeah. Then your only problem is does your CSS work?
So you'll see the data, but it'll look like garbage.
If I use Blazor Strap, it won't look like garbage, right?
Well, Blazor Strap's probably using the latest version of Bootstrap, so yeah, it still would.
Oh, so,
It is using Bootstrap.
oh, okay.
How active is the GitHub page?
Sorry?
How active the GitHub page, the commits and deletes and so on? Can you take a look?
Sure. Actually, let's look at the list of features, or the current. So there's a couple websites to go to. First of all, Blazor.net. This is like the landing page for everything Blazor. There's also this Learn Blazor, Learn-Blazor, which is kind of the same thing, but you know, you'll find some nuggets that aren't there on the other page.
I like the way that one's formatted.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot, it's a lot better broken down, segregated.
Are they both official?
This one's official. I don't believe this. I don't know for sure.
I'm just a couple of guys.
Yeah.
With few lines of code.
But This is the Blazor page, documentation on how to do all the things I basically talked about today, including JavaScript interop if you wanted to delve down that rabbit hole. As of Blazor 0.5, you can now execute any JavaScript function within C#, and you can execute any C# function within JavaScript. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I'm not going to go over this debugging. We can get to that eventually.
The previous page at the top, there was a header that said a LinkedIn course was open. And a LinkedIn course had been made open for
Was that
Blazor,
last call?
and I took the course, and it's a really good course.
Really?
Really?
Oh, good to know. Routing, they're making a lot of changes to routing actually in .NET Core 3.0, but it explains how the routing works. I mean, I could go through all these. Deployment, funny story, was actually the hardest thing for me. That's why I got Chris Hudson to help me, our in-house DevOps. And so let's go to community. So this is all community resources geared toward Blazor. There's a couple, so here's all the libraries currently for Blazor that they have kept track of. There's the Blazor's local storage. Blazor DB is also an example of that, where you want to, if you want to act more like an entity framework way to communicate with local storage. Blazor Material, implementing Google's Material components, if you like Google Material. Blazorus, this one's pretty crazy. Basically being able to reference CSS dynamically. That's as far as I'll get into that. Blazor SignalR, which I'm not sure is no necessary anymore because SignalR is a first-class citizen of .NET Core. Blazor Storage, another one. Blazor Strap, it's a bootstrap for components for Blazor. State management. I mean, there's a Canvas helper. So if you want to write a video game in your Blazor app, logging, toasts, yeah. And then there's some example projects on how to do a lot of this stuff. Blazor using Electron. Blazor Bricks is a little game made in Blazor. A chat. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I could go through every single one of these, but I highly suggest taking a look if you're actually interested about Blazor.
There's that course.
Oh, there you go. Blazor First Look on LinkedIn Learning.
LinkedIn Learning is also lynda.com, so if you have that, it'll work.
And there are also efforts to make F# a usable language Blazor.
That's kind of cool. Trailblazer.
But there's a breakdown of all the libraries and everything. But yeah, we could go forever in that. All right. So, do you really want to see the debugging?
Question.
No, hold on.
Why single pages?
Why is it called?
Yes, yes.
So it's called single page because all the assets are, well, all the things that are required to load it initially are loaded at runtime. So as you access the page, you're getting everything the page requires except for your resources, your images, so on and so forth. Those would be additional requests as you hit those pages. But spas are huge, especially with Angular. Maybe Clayton, you can better describe what that means, because I'm not very good at it.
I mean, it's just an application that, like, when you click on the next navigation link, it doesn't have to make a request to the server. So they're super fast after they load. That's really the big selling point.
So there's a menu on different pages to click on.
Yeah, they're not actually different pages.
They're not actually.
So you could navigate straight to them, but once you go to any one of them, everything that's needed to show you any of them is loaded.
So I think that this is actually limited. You couldn't do a full-blown website on it.
Why couldn't you?
Our main website is a single page application.
Yeah,
The company I work for.
the big
It
draw
works.
is that you literally
It works.
get
It's
So with the regular implementation, you have to download everything you need every time you get a page.
Yeah.
Whereas with the spa, literally you only get the little bits that you need.
Right. So yeah, you get the whole application when you enter the site. The only thing that you're going to be requesting beyond that point are assets.
But we put it on that list.
Second, can you use WPF and anything, any .NET library?
No.
Theory,
Just
in the
core.
future?
No.
Standard libraries, right?
Yeah. So
You
can you
could
use
have another project and
WPF?
call that.
Actually, maybe. .NET Core 3 is its main flagship release is the fact that you can now run WPF. What's the other one? WinForms. WinForms, WPF, and UWP on any computer on the planet. Not only that, .NET Core is packaged inside your executable, so they do not have to install the runtime.
but probably not in Blazor because you'd have to have the rendering engine for those platforms
How would you start finding it?
built into the browser.
When's 3 coming out?
March.
Yeah, I read March. So that was kind of cool.
So you can run a WinForms application on a Mac.
On a Mac.
How hilarious is that?
Oh my,
Yeah,
iPhone.
yeah, I would assume so.
Wonder if you could run like in electron.net, you're supposed to have access to the underlying machine resources. I wonder if you could run a Blazor app inside electron.net so that you can have a full application that can access device drivers and things like that.
One of the examples he had on that page was Blazor with Electron.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
I still think that version of the browser that you're talking about, running at
Electron.net is different than Electron, and it's an extension of Electron that ties into the .NET framework on the
the
machine.
same way that like if JavaScript and Electron uses Node to have access to the file system. If you can run .NET natively on a machine and not in a browser, but still have access to the DOM.
Yeah.
Not just supposed to package your web app as a actual line app, right? So
This is blasphemy.
And then Electron can run anything.
All right, I'll do the
in
debugging.
theory, it's a replacement of JavaScript, and you can do anything there.
Everything.
You just need to find the
Do not open Outlook.
Or write it.
Alright. Using C#.
Yeah.
And .NET. Whatever that is available for core.
Who else is doing WebAssembly out there right now? I mean, practical WebAssembly.
Who?
Who else is doing WebAssembly right now?
Well, Swift is working on their version of this.
Example.
Yeah.
What about Google, for example?
Kotlin? No, Flutter. Flutter.
Oh, I know about Flutter. There is also a Xamarin competitor for this using Xamarin Forms, which are built like WPF. So technically, if you want to do WPF, you could do that.
By example,
Yeah, because I've been working on WPF
I don't know, it's open source.
3D, and you cannot use a web page, so you have an app, just an app. But so then I was considering JavaScript because of that, or 3D. But now if WPF 3D or something similar is going to be available on this, then easier.
Well, just build interop between monogame and the Blazor canvas thing, and then run a WebGL plus canvas plus possibilities are endless.
Hey, it worked.
Awesome. That was quick.
So this is the debugger.
What was the secret sauce to get that working? Because we were trying the other day.
Yeah. You have to basically close every instance of Chrome, but still have it running. So you have to detach your Visual Studio, close all the Chrome pages, and through command line, execute this script,
Which you copied from that one page.
which enables remote debugging in Google, because you can't just hit a toggle in Google for some silly reason to say, I want to remote debug.
Stupid Google.
And voila, and we go down here to the DLL, and we see the C# code. We don't really need that piece. And we can now set breakpoints in the C# code.
Go hit your breakpoint.
You're setting breakpoints in C# code in a browser.
Yeah.
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 Go hit your breakpoint.
I'm not promising this will work.
Demo?
WebAssembly.
That's an interface.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. WebAssembly.
Where'd you get script from, and where did you run it in the Visual Studio?
So there's a 3-key combination, Shift-Alt-D, which then opens debugging for the Blazor application. It's a hotkey for Blazor. It then tells you, hey, you don't have remote debugging enabled. Open command prompt and execute the script.
So it actually opens the command prompt for you, then you just copy and paste the script.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll forget that.
So because it's a single page application, you cannot use Visual Studio Design.
Not yet. I have hopes, but not yet. I mean, the fact that it can do this is
Yeah, it's
awesome.
Crazy,
awesome.
yes.
Probably high level arguments with Microsoft right now.
So theoretically, you don't have to have Visual Studio open to do this, though.
Right.
If you were running Blazor as as just the Blazor app, not hosted.
Wait. So you're saying that if I'm running Blazor app by itself, I can see the C# code?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say you take.
It's still my code.
Let's say you well,
I was just
that's
thinking
you
But
just
it's
don't
not-
publish the PDBs.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. If you publish it in release, then they'll,
Then it would those files wouldn't be there.
okay.
Yeah. So let's say you take your Blazor app and you build it. You go to the build folder. You copy all the files. You put them into blob storage. And then in Azure, you configure the blob storage to be hosted as your application, as a website. So you go to the website, Shift-Alt-D, and then it's going to give you the URL to use. You close all your Chrome instances, paste that into the command line, hit enter, and then you can start debugging. You can start debugging a C# application deployed to the internet through blob storage
In Chrome.
in Chrome.
Yeah, you can only do debugging in Chrome right now.
Oh, really? Not even in Edge? Not even in
Right?
Edge?
Isn't that weird?
There's lots of things that don't work in Edge.
My grandma.
I use it at work.
All right, you no?
I think that's all I got for you guys.
It is good for the first time.
All right, that was Austin Wilson. For those of you who stuck around to the end, thank you. Again, we have these every month, first Tuesday of the month. Keep looking at the Meetup website to see when the next one is. Hopefully I'll figure out this streaming thing. And then if you can't make it, you'll be able to watch online.
Thanks, guys. But
Don't count on that.